Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Chunk by Chunk. And as you can see today, we're going to be tackling the Nether Fortress and trying to put it into our 16 by 16 by 16 space over there. But first up, I want to take us on a quick tour of what we've got in the arena so far. Take a look at the 5 chunks we've already tackled, because we haven't really had a chance to revisit the arena yet. And I want to talk a little bit more about the kind of gameplay you can expect to see in the game. Then we'll come back here and I'll show you the key features I want to include in the Nether Fortress chunk, and then we'll get straight into the building. So I'll see you over there. So here we are back over at our development arena, and as you can see, a fair bit has changed since we were last here. I've put in the 5 chunks we've built so far. So we've got the stronghold, village, desert jungle and the ice plains. And you can probably also see that some of the grass colours have changed. And that's because not only am I going to build the chunks to have the look and feel of the kind of vanilla environments they would be in. So we've got the desert here with the desert temple. It's also going to be in a desert biome. Similarly, the village here will be over in a plains biome, jungle will be a jungle biome, and so on and so forth. So that means that when you face or get near to some of the biomes in this area of the map, which will be set to hell, because that's the biome type of the Nether, you're going to come across things like ghasts, pigmen, magma cubes, etc. And that's going to be a really fun experience, I think, both for competitive players but also casual teams who are new to Minecraft PvP. Now before we head back to the Nether Fortress and start building over there, I want to talk a little bit about these first 4, I guess I consider these the home chunks, and why they're set out in these positions, but also the different orientations of them. So there's going to be a bunch of key resources in these home chunks. You're going to have access to wood and stone for basic tools in your stronghold, but you're not going to have access to enough iron to make a pickaxe. If you want to do that, you're going to have to head out to your village, into the cave, grab some coal and some iron, smelt that down, bring it back to the stronghold, and there'll be some diamonds in the basement that you can grab, and they might be a key resource if teams want to use those. And there we go, there's our friendly neighbourhood ghast. If you want arrows, for instance, the key place to get those will be in the temple. Now I'm going to give teams flint and feathers, so they'll have to also grab wood to craft those arrows. So they might do that over at the village, or at the jungle. There's obviously a lot of natural wood over in the jungle here. There will be some other arrows in the map, in the village and the jungle as well, but smaller amounts. And the reason I've done that is because, and I think I've mentioned this before, of this sort of MOBA style arena where you've got these natural lanes down the left hand side, right hand side and then the middle, and then these central spaces you'll be competing over. So let's say the yellow team is over here and the blue team is in that corner, and the blue team decide they're going to rush the centre, bridging as quickly as possible through here. And the yellow team are a bit sleepy today, so they go to the village, they go to the jungle, but they forget to head out to their desert temple, and by the time they get there, they find the blue team has stolen the flint and feathers, and they don't have as many arrows available. And I want those kinds of dynamics to be at play in the map, where teams can rush certain key objectives to deny their opposition access to a key resource, or kind of strategy that they might want to employ. That's all I'm going to talk about in terms of the resource stuff, but let's take a quick look at the orientation of the chunks. Now I think I've mentioned before that I want... Go away, ghast, you're annoying. Such a squealer. Anyway, the orientation of the chunks. So I want the environment to be accessible and obvious and not hide too much from the players, so that if you leave the stronghold bridging towards the village, it's pretty obvious there's a cave here and you're going to want to go in there and explore that environment. You can see the house, the farm, it's right here in your face. and it also provides a little bit of cover should there be some early bow fire coming in from that angle. That's the reason for the house being on this corner. Similarly, if you bridge over to the desert temple, you're provided with a little bit of cover on this side, but also these cactuses on the back, because an offensive team bridging in this way may come in diagonally, and they're going to have to contend with this cactus here and try to run past it without bumping into it and taking damage. They'll find this a particularly strategic and helpful location to be in if they manage to capture it, because they'll have some height here, they'll be locking down possibly one of your key routes out of your stronghold chunk. And if you manage to get over here early and grab the stuff in here, you'll also find that you've got a little bit of cover from bowfire on that angle as well. And if you bridge in either from this direction or you go through the jungle and out this way, the entrance is pretty clearly on this side facing the home chunk, so you can see it. And the same can be said of the jungle. If you bridge in this direction, you can see quite easily that the entrance is here. You've got the vines to contend with and the environment itself, but I'm trying to make it easy for players so that it's not too difficult. I think that's everything I want to cover on the arena so far, so we'll bid the ghasts goodbye and head back over to our Nether Fortress. Okay, so here we are back at the Nether Fortress now. Let's take a look at the kinds of features I think we can include in our chunk, and the kinds of things we need to leave out. Now, when I grabbed this Nether Fortress example from the just a vanilla pre-generated world, there was a lava lake running through here, and a lot of these pillars were in that lava lake. Now, that's something I want to make sure I leave out of our Nether Fortress, because I don't want there to be an abundance of lava in the map. You have to be really careful as a map maker, particularly in a PvP context, that you don't just provide a ton of lava to players and they can use it to defend or attack in a way which is game breaking. Yes, you can use it, but you have to be careful about how much you give to players or how much you allow them to collect, and at what point in the game you allow them to collect it. So I'm going to balance that by making sure it's not something that players have access to early on. So it'll take them a lot of time they'll have to invest to grab lava, and there won't be an abundance of it in the Nether Fortress like you do see in some Nether Fortresses in vanilla pre-generated maps, like I mentioned. The kinds of things I do want to include, though, I like this shape here. We've got a natural square, almost cube actually. I don't think it's exactly a cube because the top looks wider than the height. I like this sort of fence full block pattern. I'm not keen on the fence post being on the corner though, so we might change that. I'd also like to try and fit in a blaze spawner if we can. And then things like the corridors you get in Nether Fortresses. So these tend to be, I think they're standard 3 wide, 4 high, with the little alcoves or windows here. Quite often they have nether brick or netherrack behind them, so you get the alcove feel rather than the window like this. But I really like that. And then I think the final feature I want is the stairs, leading up and down between different levels in our fortress chunk. And those will go down to something like a nether wart farm, possibly other corridors that are designed to confuse and disorientate players a little bit, but not make it too difficult for them to find the resources. It should be a fairly obvious natural environment they're running around. So I'm going to take a first crack at building the environment and sticking it over here, and thinking about the kinds of dimensions and block sizes and stuff that we need to use to fit it in that height, which is why I've left this glass out for now. So I'll go ahead and start working on that, and then we'll look at it together. Right then, so I've gone ahead and I had a first attempt at a Nether Fortress chunk, trying to capture the look and feel of that cube along with a nether wart farm and little corridors on the side of that. But I'm not really very happy with how it's turned out at all. It doesn't feel like a very good use of the space. I've got a massive chunk of space here unused, but I came into a lot of problems with this, and I think instead of designing from the block levels I've talked about before, from the inside out, thinking about what the player's experience will be like at the ground level here, I tried to design from the outside in, and it's clearly not going to work for this chunk either. So I've got this space which people can run around and move between different levels, and maybe even jump off the edge here and then land on the bottom, and chase somebody around this chunk, almost like one of those old Quake maps. I used to really enjoy those, and I want to capture that look and feel in this fortress, because I think that'll be quite interesting. And I think I probably sacrificed some of the vanilla look and feel with that in my mind. So I've started to think about how I can better represent the fortress, and laid out a couple of examples here of different things I don't think I correctly considered when I designed this, which was the amount of height it takes to move you from one level to another. So let's say this is the floor here. Let's put some nether brick to run up stairs here to get to a second level, assuming that we've got two corridors packed on top of each other like this, because there's only a 1 block gap in between those. It doesn't actually leave us much room on top to be able to put in a roof or a slightly larger floor. I was thinking about having a 2 deep floor here, because I think that'll look better on the base of the chunk, and it allows us to do a bit more with soul sand and stuff. And then if teams and players come in and harvest the soul sand, if the soul sand was at this level and they decide they want to use it for some purpose, if they take it out, they're going to see bedrock underneath, and that's pretty unsightly. So I think we're going to have soul sand at that level, with the nether wart on top. So yeah, I want to try and buy some more height in this chunk, I guess, just to give myself a little bit more room to play with. And originally I was thinking about trying to fit it all in this 16 by 16 chunk, and including the sort of surround on the side. I'm actually throwing away that idea as well now, and I'm going to have the ground level being this height. So we'll have the new side, so this would be the new ground level here that I'm standing on, and we'll allow ourselves this extra block of space here. So it removes the roof, as it were, of the level below, if we want it to be that, up 1 block, and the floor up 1 block as well. So that's going to buy us a little bit more space to play about with, and I think that's going to make things a lot easier. Okay then, so we're back again, and this is the second iteration I've come up with, and I feel a lot happier about this and like it's moving in the right direction, but I still feel like I've got a bunch of issues. And one of the problems I've been facing, particularly with the surface of the chunk, is that I don't want this blaze spawner structure to completely dominate the skyline, and it's just massive and bulky right now. And one of the issues is, normally these work off a odd number, so 3 wide here at the top, single blaze spawner, and the square around the outside. Well, we can't do that if we want to centralize it on the chunk, because we're working with even numbers, because this is 16 blocks across. So I've taken, I guess, an artist's liberty and popped in 2 blaze spawners. I think that provides enough of a challenge to players. I don't have a major issue with that. I think that's okay. We've got the this sort of head fence. I don't know what to call this sort of little design here, 2 blocks across on top. And I had a version of this where the square in the center was a little bit larger, but again, this then brought the structure out to this kind of level, and it was just dominating the space massively. So I'm wondering whether or not to almost kind of knock through the sides here and come up with a version which is a bit more open, and perhaps providing pillars and a little bit of vision for players as they're moving around this environment. Now I know it's departing from vanilla a bit more, but I think I want to see it and try it out and take a look at it. I've also fiddled with the surface, trying to come up with something that was a cross between this kind of setup with the fences and the full blocks, but that didn't have the fence post on the corner, because I think this looked a little bit unattractive, and I think I'd rather have a full block on the corner, so I may end up going for something which is set up perhaps like that. Obviously one block further down, and then have the full block on the corner rather than the fence posts, because it just looks a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. The first level downstairs here is working a bit better for me now. I feel like we've got a good run in, up and down, the right kind of height, rise and fall here. We've got, hopefully you can see this, we've got our 4 blocks height here with space of the alcoves in and the nether wart underneath. And I've shortened the nether wart farm to what it normally would be. I think it's normally a couple of blocks longer than this, but that isn't really necessary. Teams are only going to need a couple of nether warts. It needs to represent the look and feel of vanilla and not be absolutely perfect and true to form. So I think what I'm going to do is take another crack at this and do a third iteration. The building work has been really slow and quite complex with the spaces I'm playing with, so I think I'm just going to move from each one and show you the next result and talk about what I've done and how I've built it, rather than give you tons of really tedious building footage. So I'll go ahead and do that, and we'll look at this again in a minute. Okay, so we're back, and this is the third version I've come up with. I've taken this chest out, which I forgot to mention last time. I was originally thinking I might pop in stuff like magma creams or additional blaze rods again in here, but I don't think that's needed now, so I'm going to leave that out. I knocked through the sides here and just played about with a bit of a design that would give players a bit more vision across the map when they're looking out, but not mean that they could just jump through and take a shortcut. They'd still need to run through this space and around it and use it as a PvP space potentially if they were chasing somebody, and it just moves them around in terms of orientation, their position. What I'm really pleased with actually that I didn't cover last time was the fact that you can enter this chunk from a couple of different levels. So you've got the surface here and you've got the basement here where you can come in from this side. And similarly we've got the hole on this side, so people could be purling in or bridging in at different heights. It's going to be a key chunk, it'll be in the corner of the map. There'll obviously be 2 of them, we'll have one on yellow corner, one on blue corner. But say the teams both go for the same chunk, because these are the only 2 sources of nether warts in the map, that's going to be really big, because they might end up competing over the space, having those kind of PvP battles I described, and then one team comes out on top, rescues us the nether wart or the key resources, and the other team has to go for the chunk in the other corner. And then they can put pressure on them to try and deny them that resource as well. So I think I'm getting relatively close to a version I'd feel comfortable playtesting, and I think it'll be this or possibly the next version. I'm now going to go ahead and try and make better use of this basement space we're not doing anything with right now. You can see if I try and fit an opening like this under here, it's again really tight in terms of the height of the chunk. Right then, so we're getting towards the end of the episode now, and I guess it's time for the big reveal of what I've got, and here we have it. I've actually come up with 2 versions I want to think a bit more about and work on before I decide which one to put in the map or which features to include or which to leave out. And it's been a very difficult build actually. I expected this one to be a lot easier. But one of the problems I faced with the Nether Fortress, which I don't think I correctly estimated how difficult it would be, is the changing nature of the numbers of blocks you're dealing with. And what I mean by that is, so the corridors here are 3 blocks wide, and I think having them any smaller than that in the fortress would be too constricting for players and wouldn't be kind of what they'd expect. But the corridor heights, as we saw over there, are 4 blocks. So you're continuously switching between dealing with odd numbers and even numbers in terms of height and width and depth, and then again on the blaze spawner on the top, I'm switching between odd and even numbers and trying to balance all that in your head while fitting it in a consistent space, 16 blocks across and 16 blocks high, has been really difficult. But what I've come up with I'm really pleased with, and I've just spammed some torches around so we can look at the environment together. You could come in at this basement level, bridging low or ender pearling in. You've got a staircase up to this secondary area with corridors around the side. Then we've got another run up here to the top and out onto the surface, and then our blaze spawners on the top. And this is the more open version, where you can see through the side of the chunk as we had on that one. And this is more my development idea, I guess. So we'll look at that in a second, but I think what I'm actually going to do in terms of playtesting is run a lot of games of this one first, and then put in the second level with the other corridors, because right now it's not a very useful space other than to sap time from the player, forcing them to run around into the basement. They're not gathering anything in those corridors, and I need to think a little bit about that in terms of gameplay and what I might offer to them in that space. But yeah, this I think will probably end up being the final version, or tweaked a little bit to be the final version, because this is much more like vanilla again. I've taken out the stairs that I had on these blaze spawners. I didn't want to originally put in the blocks because I thought it would just be too onerous for players having to jump up and down, but it's more like vanilla, and I don't really think it's that much of an issue after all. I have got a second, I did build a second version of this, and I have got it in my mind still of a 4 wide stair here, but you have to bear in mind for that one that it makes this structure on the surface really massive. Once you come up to this level here and then come out another block, it really starts to dominate the surface of the chunk and leave less space for players to run around. So while I would prefer to have a 4 wide stairway here, I may end up just going with this 2 wide because it's just easier in terms of the playable surface of the chunk, that it's going to get more use than the space up there where players might run up to kill a blaze occasionally, rather than it be something they're going to be spending a lot of time doing on this chunk. The majority of the spatial use here will be the surface of the chunk and then the elements underneath. And this is just the same as over here for now. So we run around and then we've got the corridors. But I have had to play around with this element, and we had the 4 wide stairs coming up here, and on this one at the top, to get the wall in and be consistent, we have to have 2 wide, and I need to find a way of transitioning from the 4 wide to the 2 wide and exit here. So again, there's still quite a lot of thinking to be done, and it probably seems like I'm flying through the content here, but it's because I'm kind of a bit zoned out right now. It's been a really difficult process to plan and build this chunk, much more difficult than I thought it was going to be. But I hope you've enjoyed seeing what I've come up with. I think people are really going to enjoy playing this chunk in the game because of the kinds of spaces that it provides. So I hope you've enjoyed the episodes. Thanks again for watching as always. If you have got any ideas or comments for me, either on the build or just my style of video, then please let me know in the comments below. But until next time, goodbye.